Thank you very much, and thank you, Dr. Srinath, for this invitation from Vivekananda Yoga University. It's an honor and a privilege to be associated with this new institution, and I look forward to great things in the field of yoga. So I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen. The topic of my presentation is the biomedical science and research on yoga, and I'm going to be focusing in this presentation on what we know about the science of how yoga works, the psychophysiology of yoga. But let me start with some introductory comments in terms of the breadth and depth of yoga and yoga therapy in Western society, because this is an area of research as well. And we have a good deal of knowledge about the breadth and depth of yoga practices. In the United States, we have a survey that's run by the federal government called the National Health Interview Survey. And this survey surveys complementary and integrative medicine practices, and included in that are metrics on the practice of yoga. So these are statistics from a number of surveys that have been done every 5 years. And what you can see is that in 2017, 14.3% of US adults had practiced yoga in the past year. Now, from an epidemiological or sociological perspective, this kind of a percentage in society is really indicative of a major movement. This is a huge percentage of the US population from that perspective. What is also remarkable is the trend that you see here, from 5% in 2002 tripling to 2017. So this is really a remarkable trend and increase. And if we expect the next survey to be in 2022 and another 50% increase, that would be 20% of the US population. So this is something that's really remarkable. Now, if you see this kind of statistic, you would expect to see the evidence in the culture, and I think that evidence is there as well. It's in the media, so these are well-known American magazines, the cover of Life. This caption reads, "Dogs do it, kids do it, even desperate housewives do it. Why we've become a yoga nation." Famous actress, part of that television series, Desperate Housewives, and a cover of Time magazine some time ago, The Science of Yoga, with famous model Christy Turlington on the cover. One of the unfortunate things, however, is that the media is portraying an image of yoga that tends to be associated with the belief of who it is and what yoga is. And unfortunately, these images suggest that yoga is practiced only by thin, rich, elegant white females in leotards. And of course, we know that yoga practice is much more than that, and that yoga practice is adaptable to all populations, including men, the elderly, children, and people with disorders and disabilities, and can be adapted to virtually any population. So this is an image problem that yoga has actually in the West, that we as a yoga community have a responsibility to educate the public. And part of that education is really coming up with the science. The popularity has expanded to the extent that we now have 5 airports in the United States which have dedicated yoga rooms. So as you're making your flight connection, you can go into these airport rooms and practice your yoga. And these are major airports: San Francisco, Chicago, Dallas, Fort Worth, and Miami. Another metric of the sort of popularity of anything in a culture is measured by the toys that children have. So now you can see that there is a made-to-move Barbie doll, which can be articulated into many different yoga postures. In addition, there's actually a Breathe With Me Barbie, which comes with 5 guided meditations. And for those girls who want to move on in yoga, they can become a yoga teacher Barbie. And this Barbie comes complete with a yoga mat, water bottle. So this is really indicative of how popular yoga has become. Now, it's not just the girls. For the boys, instead of toy soldiers, there are now toys called Yoga Joes. So these little toy plastic soldiers, instead of carrying weapons, are doing asanas. So this is really remarkable. And another remarkable characteristic is what's been going on in New York Times Square for over a decade now. Every June 21st, 18,000 people have been registering to practice yoga all day long on New York Times Square. So this is an international icon that is taken over by yoga practice. So these are really remarkable photographs. And of course, as many of you know, Prime Minister Modi is an avid yoga practitioner, and he is the one who was responsible for pushing through the United Nations proclamation of International Day of Yoga on June 21st. So here he is in June 21st of 2015, the first formal celebration in New Delhi, and he's practicing, as you can see, with a few friends. But of course, people like to do things big in India, so he brought a lot of friends with him. 50,000 people, I think, were there for this inaugural event. And the Indian consulates around the world have promoted and really pushed this whole celebration of International Day of Yoga internationally. So this is 2015. This is taken in China. So you can see that this is now really becoming a worldwide phenomenon. Another aspect is that the advertising industry is well aware of this. That's their job. They want to know, they need to know what the public is into. And yoga has this healthful image, so the advertising industry is actually using yoga images in many cases to promote things that have somewhat of a negative connotation. So here they're selling alcohol. This is a vodka bottle doing a headstand on a yoga mat. Here they're selling a sleeping pill. This morning was brought to you by a good night's sleep with an image of a yoga asana. And of course, if you watch television at all, there are many pharmaceutical ads, and a lot of those have people practicing yoga, suggesting that if you take their particular pharmaceutical, you will be healthy like someone practicing yoga. Large corporations have really used this as well. This is a number of years ago. McDonald's was offering DVDs of fitness, and they had a yoga DVD. And then out of a Connecticut rest stop, I brought a fruit and yogurt, and on my fruit and yogurt cup, there was someone practicing yoga, complete with this meditative Gyan Mudra posture. So it's really remarkable to see how deeply yoga has penetrated itself into American culture. Another aspect of yoga that is now becoming very popular is the whole idea of yogic therapy, which first became popular at the beginning of the 20th century in India. That popularity grew in India until the government in India commissioned this book, Yogic Therapy, in 1963. That popularity continued and has come to the West as well. Now there are dozens of books, including this one by my colleague Timothy McCall, Yoga as Medicine, and there's now books on yoga for specific disorders. So this has really grown as well. And you can see that in the media as well. Another cover of Time magazine, How Your Mind Can Heal Your Body, with an unmistakable yoga practice image. And in fact, this is now becoming formalized into a profession. So I work closely with the International Association of Yoga Therapists, which accredits yoga therapy schools, which then certify individual yoga therapists. This organization has an annual members meeting. They have a research journal called the International Journal of Yoga Therapy, of which I'm the editor-in-chief. And they also are cognizant of the value of research and support the annual Symposium on Research that I coordinate. So let's turn our attention now to the psychophysiology of yoga. How does yoga work on the mind and body? What are the mechanisms involved? And this is a growing area of research. In fact, on the left is a book that's put out by Harvard Health Publications called An Introduction to Yoga. And I was the medical editor for this book, and we cover a lot of the research that's been done on yoga. But what's really remarkable about this is that on the Harvard Health Publishing website, there are actually articles on the benefits of yoga. This one talking about the research on yoga for anxiety and depression. And what's really remarkable about this is that we have here a major leading medical school, Harvard Medical School, who's got their name and logo right next to yoga. It's almost as though Harvard Medical School is invested in promoting yoga, which is another sign of the times. Because if you had asked me 25 years ago if this was conceivable, I would have said no way. But clearly yoga has become extremely embedded and extremely popular. And the research is growing, as I said, dramatically. And a sign of that is the appearance of reviews and meta-analyses of conducted studies that have been done. And that really is a sign that there's a body of research out there that's evaluating and summarizing. And so scientists will publish review papers and meta-analyses of yoga research studies, and I'm showing just a few of these here. So on the top is the paper that addresses how yoga reduces stress in terms of body cognition and emotion. This one is reviewing yoga and immune system functioning. This one, neurophysiological and neurocognitive mechanisms, stress again. And at the bottom, self-regulatory mechanisms of yoga for psychological health. And we have also reviewed this in our medical textbook, The Principles and Practice of Yoga in Healthcare. This is a unique book that summarizes a lot of the research that's been done on so-called yoga therapy. It is an edited medical textbook written in modern medical language by 60 yoga researchers internationally. And on chapter 4, again, we summarize the psychophysiology of yoga from the perspective of the research that has been done. Now, I want to take you back historically to some of the early research that was done on yoga. And one of the types of research that was done was to examine the yoga masters, these very accomplished yoga practitioners in India, and to try and understand what was going on with their mind and their brain when they were doing these yoga practices. And this is one of the strongest studies in that era. This was done in the 1950s. A team of researchers traveled all over India for an entire year. And they were hunting down these yoga masters and these proficient practitioners and hooking them up to the recording equipment you see in this picture. And what they concluded from this extensive study was that physiologically, yogic meditation represents deep relaxation of the autonomic nervous system. Now, this is significant from several perspectives. First of all, the idea of regulating the autonomic nervous system is underlying a central construct in the field not only of yoga, but of the entire field of what we call mind-body medicine. And that construct is the idea of self-regulation of internal state, both psychological state and physical state. The idea that through these training practices of yoga, you can develop the ability to control internal functioning, both mental and physical. Now, the autonomic nervous system is particularly interesting because it was originally called autonomic because it was believed to be automatic. In other words, you had no input or could not put any input into that system. And here are these yoga practitioners able to modulate and manipulate the autonomic nervous system. The other thing that's important about the autonomic nervous system is that this is the system that is involved in mediating the stress and emotion response in the brain and body. So this suggests that yogis have this ability to modulate their stress and emotion response, something that I'm going to show you evidence for. Now, of course, yoga is most known for the physical postures, the asanas. These exercises are very different than Western aerobic type exercises. And they're much more focused on flexibility, on isometric holding of exercises, specific movements, body-mind coordination, balance. And there are many studies that have been done that are very objective measures. These are measured in degrees and angles of motion and the degree to which individuals can stretch and so on. So this is very strong evidence. This is one example of the many studies that have been done on yoga asana practice showing that you can take naive individuals who have never practiced yoga, and after a couple of months you can see statistically significant improvements in a number of measures of flexibility, in muscular endurance, and also in muscle strength. And of course, there's a mind-body connection, and that mind-body connection works both ways. So when you manipulate the body, you have an impact on mental state. And of course, the asanas are unique. They generate more of a relaxation effect, I believe, than aerobic type exercises in the West. Now, of course, these practices, I think, are very healthful. And that is, I think, due to the nature of these types of practices and exercises. So this is a study that compared traditional exercisers, individuals who are long-distance runners and actually sprinters as well. And what they were measuring in this study was fat mass percent, which is a key metric in cardiovascular disease risk. And what you can see is that the control subjects who were not, intense regular exercisers had much higher levels of fat mass percent than they did the long distance runners and sprinters. But look at the yoga group. It is as good as, if not slightly better than, these two categories. So there's something about yoga, despite being heavily aerobic like long distance running and sprinting, has a very healthful effect on something like fat mass percent. Now, another important practice within yoga, of course, is the sense of relaxation. And in yoga classes, we have shavasana, or corpse pose, in which we become aware of our physical body and allow this body to deeply relax. In fact, this has made its way into Western psychology for the number of decades, and it's been called progressive relaxation. So this is one study that was done on progressive relaxation technique, which is very similar to Shavasana. And what you can see in this randomized controlled trial, the dark bars are the progressive relaxation group. You can see the reduction in perceived stress. The control condition had no change. In terms of anxiety, also a reduction, but no change in the control condition. You can see an increase in the sense of relaxation. And then there's also objective measures, a reduction in heart rate with progressive relaxation, no change in the control condition. They also, in this study, measured the stress hormone cortisol. And what you can see is before and after, a reduction in the progressive relaxation group of the stress hormone cortisol, no change in the control condition. So clearly, the relaxation, an important practice within yoga, individually and separately, has its impact on the stress response and on the sense of perceived stress. Another key practice within traditional yoga is the breathing techniques and exercises, or pranayama. And one of the most common and most well-studied breathing techniques is the long, slow, deep yogic breathing pattern. And there's an enormous amount of research now that's been done recently on slow breathing and its effects both on the physical body as well as on mental and emotional functioning. One thing about long, slow breathing is that it's a highly efficient form of gas exchange, which means that if your body is challenged, such as at high altitude where there are low levels of oxygen, yoga practitioners are able to maintain higher levels of oxygen saturation at high altitude than control subjects that don't do pranayama practice. Furthermore, that level of oxygen saturation is equivalent to Sherpas who were raised at high altitude. So there's something about this pranayama practice, this slow breathing, that is highly efficient. And it's very effective at improving gas exchange. Another aspect of slow breathing is that it has direct impact on the autonomic nervous system. And of course, the autonomic nervous system is involved in the regulation of blood pressure. It's involved in the regulation of stress. It's involved in the regulation of emotion. In this particular study, they gave the participants a stressful intervention. One group practiced slow breathing, the other one did not. And what you can see in the control group that did not practice slow breathing, this is the increase in their stress level. Those that were practicing slow breathing had a much lower increase in stress. So breathing techniques have a direct impact on the stress response. Finally, as I mentioned, this control of the autonomic nervous system means that it's involved in blood pressure regulation as well. In this study, what you can see, and this is the measure of systolic blood pressure, during the period of immediate slow breathing, you can see an immediate reduction in systolic blood pressure, and when the breathing stopped, it then resumed to normal. This was the control group that had no change over time. So this is really remarkable, and we're starting to really understand the neuroscience of how breathing has an impact on both the central and the autonomic nervous system. I want to jump to sort of the pinnacle of modern neuroscientific technology. And this is the technology we call neuroimaging. This is a very powerful form of research that uses these large machines, these brain scanners. This is particularly fMRI, one of the types of scanners that's out there. The power of this technology is that we can peer into the live active brain during the act of meditation, and we can pinpoint with extreme accuracy, within millimeters, which region of the brain is being activated during meditation. Furthermore, there's a number of other things that you can measure with that. You can also measure changes from second to second. So it's an extremely powerful technique because it gives us high precision. And because we know which each region of the brain is responsible for in terms of human behavior, we can then make conclusions about where meditation is acting and how it's influencing our brain functioning and then ultimately also our bodily functioning. Now, one of the kinds of studies that's been done with brain scanning is to ask the question, do the brains of long-term meditators behave differently than non-meditators? Are there regions of the brain that are more active in meditators than non-meditators? What's the difference between these? There's a number of studies that have done this kind of thing with long-term meditators. And in this particular study that I've chosen to show you, they showed that a number of regions of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, parietal cortex, thalamus, putamen, caudate, and midbrain, all had changes. And the observed changes appear in structures of the brain that underlie the attention network and also those that relate to emotion and autonomic function. So the interesting finding here is that this very powerful objective technique is verifying what we see behaviorally, this ability to regulate emotion, autonomic function, and stress. So that's consistent. Now, there's a change in the attention networks. Well, meditation, most simply defined, is the focus of attention. So when you begin to meditate, when you focus your attention on a mantra or on a breath, or on a candle or any kind of other target of meditation, you are engaging the attention networks in the brain to bring focus to that target. When you do that consistently over time, regularly with practice, you become better at focusing your attention. And so it is no surprise, really, that we see changes in the attention networks in the brain that behave more efficiently in meditators than in non-meditators.